In the far reaches of the galaxy, where light bends and memory fades, there was once a world called Crictow, a jewel of the sands, a desert full of life. Twin suns burned above it, casting long shadows across endless dunes. Humans and Dragonkin called it home. They built cities of glass and bronze, towers that rose from the desert like frozen flames. Their power came not from stars or coal, but from the planet's heart, deep aquifers of ancient water. To live on Crictow was to live in balance. Too much taken, and the sands turned cruel. Too little, and the world slept. For centuries, it worked, until greed broke the balance. Corporate miners came first. They said they would take only what was needed. But when profit flowed like water, they dug deeper and deeper. They ruptured the planet's veins. The aquifers bled dry. The great water towers began to fail, one after another, until only silence remained. No war followed, just neglect. The Galactic Relief Council met to decide if Crictow was worth saving. They calculated, they debated, and they walked away. The council chambers floated above a clean, green world. Ambassadors and executives spoke in numbers, not empathy. Water deficit, 12 trillion liters. Rescue cost, 9.2 billion credits. Chance of survival, 24%. The answer was cold and simple. Cost exceeds benefit. And with that, they condemned a world. The people of Crictow looked up, not for rain, but for ships. Each streak of light in the sky was someone escaping. Each silence below was someone left behind. Among them were the Dragonkin, proud beings of scale and spirit. Their wings folded, their hearts unbroken. They whispered that the heart of the dunes would awaken again. But hope had become a luxury only the rich could afford. In the western wastes lived a dragon child named Crictow. Too small to fly, too kind to hate. His parents were engineers with tickets on the last evacuation ship, but seats were rationed by weight. One crate of supplies equaled one child's life. Crictow was left behind, promised that someone would return. He waited. Days turned to weeks. The landing pads vanished beneath shifting sand. By the time his transmitter died, hope was gone. 6 hours before dawn on the 47th dry day, a transport ship fell from the sky. It wasn't a rescue. It was an accident. Private James Cooper of the 9th Relief Division fought to control the fall, but Crictow showed no mercy. The ship slammed into the dunes. When the fire died, only one life sign remained. Command, this is Cooper. Ship's gone. Crew's gone. One canteen. Request rescue. No response. He sat in silence, surrounded by endless sand. He wasn't supposed to be here. But sometimes, fate doesn't ask permission. He began to walk north, toward a faint beacon. 15 kilometers. Maybe 20. Each step burned. His armor cracked. His throat turned to dust. He had one canteen, and orders to survive. But the desert had other plans. On the third ridge, Cooper found ruins, towers half buried in sand. Wind whispered through broken glass. Children's laughter. Turbines humming. Echoes of a world that once believed in the future. In the center stood a small figure, kneeling beside a shattered transmitter. "Pete, please, sir." Cooper froze. The voice was weak, almost gone. A child lay half buried in the sand. Scales cracked. Eyes cloudy. It was Crictow. He whispered, "Just one sip of water." Cooper looked at his canteen, his only chance at survival. For days of life, if rationed carefully. But the boy wasn't dying. He was waiting, for someone who would never come. Cooper knelt. The boy flinched, expecting pain. Instead, Cooper unscrewed the cap and handed him the canteen. Not a sip, not a drop. The whole thing. Crictow stared, then drank, shaking, desperate, alive again. When he tried to return it, Cooper smiled faintly. "Keep it. You need it more than I do." Crictow whispered, "Why would you give it all?" Cooper looked at the horizon. "Because someone has to prove there's still good in the universe." The desert wind rose, golden, fierce, alive. That moment changed everything. A soldier who gave everything. A child who learned what mercy truly meant. This was where it began. The day a human gave his life. For one sip of water. The suns rose over Crictow like twin furnaces. Their light didn't warm. It punished. But for the first time in weeks, Crictow didn't wake to silence. He woke to the sound of a human breathing beside him. Private James Cooper sat against a half-buried transmitter. His visor was cracked. His canteen was empty. The horizon stretched forever. Crictow stared at him, guilt burning in his chest. The man's lips were dry and cracked, the kind that meant death was close. And yet he smiled. "Morning, kid." His voice was rough, sandpaper mixed with kindness. Crictow didn't understand all the words, but he understood the tone. He lowered his gaze. "You gave too much." Cooper shrugged. "Nah, just water. You're still breathing. That's what matters." Among the dragonkin, giving water was sacred, a vow of life and death. And this human had made that vow without even knowing. By midday, they were walking north, toward a weak beacon still blinking on Cooper's wrist. Each step burned. The air shimmered like boiling glass. Crictow stumbled often. His wings dragged in the sand. Each time, Cooper slowed down, pretending to check his compass so the boy could catch up. When Crictow apologized, Cooper just smiled. "Hey, no worries. You're lighter on your feet than most recruits." Crictow didn't know what a recruit was, but he knew encouragement when he heard it. They walked in silence after that, the kind of silence that connected, not divided. As the suns dipped lower, Cooper started talking, not to fill the air, but to stay awake. He told stories about his homeworld, Vallis Prime, a place of forests so thick you could drink the air. He spoke of the academy, where soldiers were taught not just to fight, but to help. "Back home," he said, "we had this rule. If you've got more than you need, you share it. Because one day, you might have nothing." Crictow tilted his head. "Humans teach this? The good ones do. My people teach, survive first. Share later. When there's enough." Cooper smiled faintly. "And has there ever been enough?" Crictow said nothing. The silence was his answer. Near the ruins of an old water processor, they found a skeleton, not human, not dragonkin, but something ancient. In its hand was a metal charm shaped like a spiral, the symbol of the heart of the dunes. Crictow knelt beside it. "Our elders said this is the soul of the world. It sleeps when we forget who we are." He pressed his palm to the sand. "It is very quiet now." Cooper looked to the horizon. Maybe it's waiting for someone to remind it. Crictow looked up. "Who?" "Us." The boy didn't know whether to laugh or cry. By the second day, the heat was alive, twisting the air, whispering lies. Crictow saw something ahead. "Water. I see water." He ran, wings open in excitement. Cooper followed, but when he reached the top of the dune, there was nothing. Just sand. Crictow dropped to his knees. "The dunes lie. They always lie." Cooper placed a hand on his shoulder. "Yeah," he said softly. "But sometimes lies keep us walking long enough to find the truth." The boy gave a weak, shaky laugh. They stayed there until nightfall, two shadows in a sea of dust. When the sun set, the heat vanished. The dunes turned to ice. Cooper built a small fire with scraps from his pack. Crictow curled close, scales glowing faintly in the flame. After a long silence, the boy asked, "Why did you come here?" Cooper hesitated. "Wasn't supposed to. We were dropping supplies. Then a meteor storm hit. I crashed." "So you fell?" "Yeah." He smiled faintly. "Fell hard." Crictow looked into the fire. "Maybe the heart of the dunes brought you. You think your planet wanted me to crash? Maybe it wanted to remember what kindness feels like." The fire crackled softly, a fragile light in a dying world. Late that night, a low roar rumbled across the dunes. Cooper looked up. "Engines." He fired a flare into the sky. A red streak cut through the dark, bright, desperate, beautiful. Both of them watched. But the ship didn't turn, didn't slow. It was a freighter, leaving the planet behind. "They don't see us," Crictow said quietly. Cooper lowered the flare gun. "They see us," he whispered. "They just don't care." By the third day, Cooper could barely stand. His vision blurred. His lips bled. Crictow held out a small vial. Moisture gathered from condensation overnight. "You need it." Cooper shook his head. "You first. Please." "No. Then I will not drink either." His voice trembled, but his will was strong. Cooper sighed, then took one small sip, just enough to ease the boy's worry. "Stubborn little lizard." "Strong little dragon," Crictow corrected. For the first time, Cooper laughed. "Yeah, that you are." That evening, the beacon on Cooper's wrist flickered. The desert had moods. In the morning, it whispered through the dunes, like the planet still remembered breath. By midday, it roared. At night, it went silent, holding its tongue before it broke. For 2 days, Private James Cooper and the dragon child Crictow walked through that silence. Each step vanished behind them, erased by the wind. They were moving ghosts, and both knew they were running out of time. The boy's stride slowed. His bright scales turned gray. His body trembled in the heat. Cooper wasn't much better. He was dehydrated, his eyes blurred. The horizon looked like fire. He kept moving out of habit, a soldier's instinct. When he stumbled, Crictow caught him. When he fell, the boy pulled at his arm, whispering words Cooper didn't understand, but felt. Don't stop. Not yet. Please, not yet. By the third day, Cooper's wrist beacon died. The blue pulse that once beat like a heart was gone. He dropped to the sand. End of the road, he muttered. Crictow knelt beside him. There must be more north, he said. Mirages, Cooper whispered. Like the others. The boy looked away. Then we keep walking anyway. Why? Cooper asked. Because you did, the boy answered. When you should have left me. Cooper gave a tired laugh. You're a stubborn little dragon. Crictow smiled weakly. You taught me that. As dusk fell, Cooper's vision dimmed. He couldn't feel his hands. Crictow, he said softly. If I fall, you keep going. The boy shook his head. No. The heart of the dunes doesn't take one alone. It takes both or none. Superstition, Cooper whispered. Truth, the boy said. The desert remembers kindness. It always returns what's given. Cooper smiled faintly. Then maybe it'll give us rain. That night, they didn't build a fire. There was nothing left to burn. They sat beneath the fading stars. Crictow spoke of his people, of oases, laughter, and wings that once shimmered blue. Cooper listened. He pictured it. He wasn't a man of faith, but he wanted to believe something still cared. The stars blurred in his eyes. He realized he was crying, not from pain, but relief. He'd found something in the emptiness, purpose. The next morning, Cooper didn't wake easily. Crictow shook him, whispering, James. Please. Wake. Nothing. He pressed his ear to Cooper's chest. A heartbeat. Weak, but there. The boy didn't hesitate. He tore a scale from his arm, shaped it like a bowl, and dug in the sand for condensation. A drop formed. He hit the activation rune. The system flickered to life. He looked up and whispered, Please. Then everything went dark. When he woke, the light was softer, not sun, but metal. He was on a cot, cleaned, alive. Next to him lay Cooper, breathing through a mask. Alive too. Crictow reached out and touched his hand. Cooper's eyes opened. Hey, kid. The boy's voice broke. You came back. Cooper smiled. Guess someone heard you shouting. Crictow shook his head. No, they heard us. Later, when the medics asked how they survived, they had no real answer. They just said, we didn't survive because we were strong. We survived because we refused not to. Days later, they learned the truth. That the relay had been transmitting for decades. That a passing patrol ship, the Aurelia 9, had caught the signal. But none of that mattered. What mattered was this. A human gave away his last water. A dragon child gave back his last breath. And somewhere between those two acts, the universe remembered what kindness felt like. The first sound James Cooper heard after waking was rain. Not real rain, not yet. Just the hiss of condensation lines running through the medical bay of the Aurelia 9. For a moment, he thought he'd dreamed it all. The desert, the dragon child, the burning sky. Then he turned his head. Crictow slept in the bunk beside him, a thin blanket over scaled shoulders. The boy breathed evenly now. His color had returned, faint silver along each scale, like moonlight remembering itself. For the first time since his crash, the air smelled of water. When Cooper tried to sit up, pain shot through his ribs. A medic hurried over, voice soft. Easy, Lieutenant. You're safe. The boy brought you to the beacon. Without him, you wouldn't be here. Cooper swallowed. How long? 3 days, the medic said. You were both nearly gone. The relay was centuries old. We almost missed it. Cooper looked again at Crictow. Then thank the desert, he whispered. It remembered us. Outside the viewport, Crics tour rolled beneath them, bronze and crimson clouds swirling like a storm. From orbit, the planet looked beautiful again. A polished gem floating in darkness. But beauty, Cooper realized, was a lie. You couldn't see the thirst from up here. Command chatter filled the comms, cold reports and numbers. Abandonment protocols. Resource orders. The galaxy was already moving on. He wanted to shout, there are still lives down there. But words felt small against a machine built from indifference. So instead, he turned to the boy. When Crictow woke, He stared through the viewport for a long time. He had never been above his world before. From here, the dunes looked like rivers of gold winding through darkness. "It's still beautiful," he said quietly. "Yeah," Cooper replied. "Sometimes beauty's just what's left after the hurt." Crictow's reflection shimmered in the glass. "Will it heal?" Cooper hesitated. "No, but maybe we will." The boy nodded, accepting it like an ancient truth. 2 days later, Cooper insisted on returning to the surface. Command protested, but he overruled them. He and Crictow descended in a drop shuttle, landing amid the northern flats. The heat greeted them like an old ghost. They walked to the ridge where Crictow had carried him. The footprints were gone. The wind had erased everything. Except one thing. Half buried in the sand lay the canteen. Cooper picked it up. His ID number was still faintly visible. Crictow touched it. "This was where you gave everything." Cooper shook his head. "Where we did." He knelt and buried the canteen. A grave not of death, but of promise. The shuttle's comms crackled. Command demanded data, coordinates, reports. Always numbers. Cooper stared at the dunes. "Tell them we found proof," he said. "Proof of what?" the pilot asked. He looked at Crictow. "That compassion isn't extinct." The pilot didn't know how to file that. Maybe it wasn't meant for the record. Before departure, Crictow asked for one last walk. They went north, to a ridge where old turbines jutted from the sand. Crictow placed his palm on the metal. "This is where my people first drew water from the deep. We called it the spine of the world." Cooper placed his hand beside the boy's. Flesh and scale, 2 worlds touching the same broken machine. Something deep beneath them hummed. A faint vibration. Maybe a tremor. Maybe the planet remembering its own heartbeat. Crictow smiled. "It's listening." When the Aurelia 9 lifted off, its thrusters carved canyons of flame across the dunes. From above, they watched the sand close over the scars. "Looks like it forgave us," Cooper said. Crictow's eyes glimmered. "Then maybe it forgives all." He pressed his hand to the viewport, whispering a farewell in his own tongue. The translators would never catch the meaning. But Cooper understood. The heart of the dunes was no longer silent. Their journey back to the inner systems took weeks. Cooper spent his time writing reports that no one would read, and stories no one had asked for. He wrote about a dragon child who carried him, a canteen buried in sand, and how a dying desert had taught him what humanity truly meant. Crictow learned to read ship systems, tapping holographic keys with clumsy claws. He asked endless questions about stars, oceans, and the taste of rain. Cooper answered every one. At night, they sat in the observation deck and watched the stars streak by. Crictow traced new constellations with his claw, naming them as he pleased. Cooper never corrected him. When they reached Allura Prime, the docking bay opened to rain. Real rain, thousands of droplets racing down the glass. Crictow pressed his hands against it, eyes wide. "It's alive," he whispered. Cooper smiled. "Yeah, kid. So are we." Weeks later, Cooper stood before a tribunal. They wanted his official statement for the record. He told them everything, except the part that mattered. When they asked why he gave away his last water, he said, "Because reason had failed us. Someone had to try kindness." The clerk typed the words without understanding. But somewhere, in the upper archives, those words would be read again, and maybe change things. Before redeployment, Cooper and Crictow stood side by side in the hangar. The boy now wore an emblem on his chest, a small spiral of the heart of the dunes, carved from scrap metal. Cooper had polished it himself. "What will you do now?" he asked. "Learn," Crictow said. "Then teach." The dunes remembered us. Now I'll remind others. Cooper nodded. "You'll make a hell of a teacher." The boy smiled. "You already were." The ship's engines ignited. The horizon turned gold. As the stars wheeled ahead, Crictow whispered one last prayer. No gods, no requests, just gratitude. And somewhere between the stars, something vast and unseen stirred. Not divine, not miraculous, just aware. The universe, listening to the smallest proof of goodness it had left. The canteen was never found again. Not by scavengers. Not by the reclamation drones that stripped Crictow of its towers and turbines. The dunes kept it, the way the sea keeps a shipwreck. Not as debris, but as memory. But the story of the man and the dragon child did not stay buried. Echoes in orbit. A year after the Aurelia 9 returned, whispers began spreading through the relief corps. No one knew who leaked the footage. Maybe a medic, maybe a technician with a guilty heart. But one day, the video appeared on the public net. It showed a human soldier staggering through a storm, carrying a scaled child across the dunes. No words, just the sound of wind, and the gleam of a single canteen pressed into trembling claws. In 3 days, 1 billion people had seen it. In a week, the Galactic Relief Council could no longer pretend it hadn't happened. The hearing. The council chamber was marble and glass, built to reflect enlightenment. But under those cold lights, the delegates looked like ghosts debating the price of souls. Cooper sat before them, plain uniform, steady voice. Crictow stood beside him, taller now, still young, his scales bright again. Lieutenant Cooper, one delegate said, you violated protocol. You risked classified equipment to save a non-citizen life form. Do you have anything to say? Cooper's voice was calm. Yes, he said. I'd do it again. The room froze. Because the math you live by forgets what makes the galaxy worth saving. Crictow stepped forward. You count stars, he said, but not the warmth between them. For one long heartbeat, no one moved. Then the room, the entire machine of bureaucracy and indifference, seemed to flinch. The accord. Weeks later, a single document passed through the council chambers. The Crictow Accord. Its preamble quoted a line from Cooper's helmet cam. Someone's got to prove there's still good in the universe. The accord declared that no world could be abandoned solely for cost. It changed policy across the stars. A soldier's defiance had become law. Reporters called it sentimental. Economists called it reckless. But out in the frontier colonies, people called it hope. The academy. Years passed. Cadets marched beneath banners stitched with the spiral of the heart of the dunes. Before graduation, each one stopped before a glass case. Inside was a replica of an old canteen, dinted, sand-scoured, engraved with simple words. For the human who taught me that one sip is never enough when you can give everything. Each cadet placed a hand on the glass and whispered the oath. To give more than reason allows. Some smiled. Some cried. All remembered. The Phoenix Fleet. 10 years after the accord, a new fleet of ships launched from Allura Prime. Sleek, solar-winged vessels built to bring rain to barren worlds. The first ship bore a name written in both Terran and Draconic script. Phoenix 1. Its pilot was Crictow. Taller now. Stronger. His scales deep bronze. Before launch, he stood before the crowd. Once, a dying world taught 2 travelers that mercy can outlive despair, he said. Today, we prove it can rebuild galaxies. He looked up at the twin suns rising through the glass. For those still waiting for water, he said, we're coming. The engines roared to life, and for the first time in years, a dead world heard thunder again. Not from destruction, but from departure. The last conversation. Before the launch, Crictow visited Cooper one last time. The old soldier sat beneath a memorial tree, its holographic leaves glowing with names. The lost souls of Crics tour. You're really going, Cooper said. Someone has to prove the story wasn't luck, Crictow replied. Cooper smiled. You already did, kid. Crictow reached out his hand, scaled, trembling slightly. Cooper took it. Flesh and scale. Man and child. Thank you, Crictow whispered. For the whole canteen. Don't thank me, Cooper said. Just keep pouring. They parted without ceremony, without salute. Only the quiet knowing that the universe was a little less empty than before. Returned to dust. Years later, on the anniversary of the accord, a survey drone flew over the northern flats. It sent back one image, a glint of metal buried in sand, and a single bloom of blue-green moss clinging to it. It shouldn't have been possible. Not on that world. Not anymore. But the image spread across the net, captioned by an anonymous user. The desert remembers kindness. Closing vision. Far across the stars, the Phoenix Fleet traced arcs of silver through the void, bringing rain to forgotten worlds. Inside his command ship, Crictow watched clouds gather over another once-dead planet. He whispered the oath again, not as ritual, but as prayer, to give more than reason allows. He thought of a human soldier kneeling in the sand, offering water to a stranger, of how hope had tasted that day, dust, salt, and something eternal. And somewhere deep beneath the atmosphere, the first drops began to fall. Each one a heartbeat. Each one a promise kept.